Well, I have to start way back. And I'd never met anyone who went to college. No one in my family. My father was a machinist, and I had a job as an office boy. I studied to be a tool and die maker. And there was this woman who was my boss, Grace DeWigger, who unfortunately passed before I had a chance to thank her. Saw something in me, and she said, you know, you ought to really go to college, and you really ought to go to art school because your head works like that. And I kind of had to ask, what do artists do in that? And I did. I went to college. And I was going to go to Fredonia and study theater, but I was going to drive an old car there, and we had a flat tire, and I didn't want to drive 60 miles with a flat tire or spare. So I went to art school. So I ended up having my bachelor's and my master's in painting and art history. And so this woman who asked me about going to college and art school shaped my life. It never occurred, I'd never met anyone in a college. It was the most frightening thing in the world. People ate there and had libraries and they slept there. It was so exciting. The second thing that shaped me so much was the best gift I've ever had. It was my father, who was a machinist. And every couple years he would say, Jimmy, what is it you're going to do after you get out of art school? And I said, Dad, I'm going to paint. His gift was he never asked a follow-up question. He just assumed something would go. The next major influence is I worked as a stage manager for years, and I'll talk in a second about stealing from directors and learning what not to do. But I taught at a very high-powered Institute of Technology in New Mexico, and the president of this place was an astrophysicist, Sterling Colgate, and his wife, Rosie. Mm-hmm. And they somehow managed to get across to me that I was of worth. Mm. That things would I would eventually be good at something. And so we'll go ahead and try. Some of it will be wonderful, some will be truly awful. But they gave me the faith in myself to try something. Probably another good influence was way back then there weren't video cameras, so there are no records of the first 20 or 30 shows I did. Thank God. I would have to search them out and
back.
So what I got out of all these influences is the courage or stupidity to try, and somehow figuring out that if I were a baseball player and I could hit a ball 1 in 3 times, I could get in the Hall of Fame. So just keep directing these plays and see what happens. So I guess what it comes down to is all of these influences turned me into whatever worth I may have as a human being. Mm-hmm. And I think all art, certainly the art of theater with all its humanity, the art is really a residue of the human being. And that's what's wonderful about theater. We have all these human beings. Painting was just too lonely. I left painting. The studio was lonely, but suddenly I can be in a whole room full of people and each have their residue to make this play happen. And that was truly the gifts I got from all of these people that made me what I was. I also had the advantage of spending some amount of years as a stage manager and stealing from some directors, looking at some and saying, well, you don't have to make that mistake because it doesn't work and you can see that. And I got to work with the Alan Fletchers and the John Juries and try and overhear what they were saying to an actor. Like Alan Fletcher, he was a very shy man, would sit in a corner for the longest time very quietly. And then he would gather the actors and he would say something, would just take a couple minutes, no, 30 seconds, and the whole play would change. And I would sit there and I'd say, and I'd work my way in and say, what's he saying? What's he saying? this is a good place to steal. And so all of those people. And then I had the terrific advantages of I had two lives. I had a university where I loved teaching, and I'm very proud of the students I had, the MFA directors, and I had a professional life. So I could go back and forth. I could go out there, and there's so many people in the National Theater Conference have that. I could bring back the scale and the values to the students. And I guess maybe most proud of as a teacher, out of my whole career, I managed to turn out 26 MFA directors, of which 24 still do theater or television or teach or so on. And I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of that. I selected pretty carefully, and I guess I had to throw a lot of them out too. But these are, I think the best piece of advice I ever got came from Annie Meacham, who I directed in A Streetcar Named Desire. And it came from Eva Gallion. And now Annie was pretty difficult to direct. I was a young director, and the production was awful because I didn't know how to say no to her. She was so much stronger than me. But she passed on what she learned when she was with Eva Gallion. And that was, for an actor should never do anything, they should allow. They should be available for what happens, because it focuses them on whatever something else is doing. So I think over the years, thousands of times, lately, not for the first many years when I knew everything, but in the last 10 or 15 years, I think maybe the most common note I'll give to an actor is you're starting to look at something here, so pay attention, because in the next week or so, something's going to present itself. So be careful. Don't let it get by without seeing it. It's going to tell you what to do here. And I think that goes right back to Annie telling me what Eva Gallion told her. And then, yeah. Yeah, what you wanted?